Members, please stand while the Chief Executive enters the chamber. The Chief Executive. Members, please take your seat. Members, on behalf of all members of this council, I would like to welcome the new Chief Executive. In his first week of assuming office, he is here to attend the question and answer session at this council. I would also like to welcome all principal officials for attending this session. This new governing team is established after improving the electoral systems. It is a sign that Hong Kong has restored order from chaos, and then we're moving towards prosperity with order restored. This is a new chapter for Hong Kong. The Chief Executive is, of course, all prepared to explain his governing philosophy to members and to answer questions from members. President Xi Jinping came to Hong Kong on the 1st of July to deliver an important address. He mentioned the check and balance function of the Chief Executive and the legislature. It is a mutual check and balance. The Legislative Council will therefore continue to support and monitor the governance of the government. We will have good exchanges with the executive so that we could fully achieve the 4 musts and the 4 expectations mentioned by the presidency, and we'll work together for the well-being of the people of Hong Kong. Now, I call upon the Chief Executive to address the Council. President, members of the Council, members of the public, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew Leung, President of the Legislative Council, for arranging for me to attend the Chief Executive's question and answer session on the 6th day of my assuming office as the 6th Chief Executive. The Legislative Council is an important element of the governance structure of the SAR. Executive-legislature relations are of utmost importance. That is why on the day following my election, I met with Mr. Andrew Leung at this council. And then in May, I invited members in groups to have exchanges with me. I'm glad to be at this council again in this chamber to explain my governance philosophy to members and to answer any questions from members. With the implementation of the Hong Kong National Security Law, improvement to the electoral system, we are now fully implementing the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. The meetings of this council are back on the right track. The damages brought about by resisting the one country of two systems have come to an end. We have ended the destructive phase. We're entering a constructive phase. This is an important milestone. Good interaction between the executive and legislature is an important foundation for us starting a new chapter together. I will be implementing an executive-led governance. So I propose that at the antechamber of this council, there will be an exchange session every month. Each time it will be led by a secretary of department, SOD, or deputy secretary of department, DSOD, together with 5 or 6 directors of bureau and other officials for exchanges and communication with members at the antechamber. This will help them to better learn about each other, and then there could be exchanges either on set topics or without any set topics. For example, The Chief Secretary for Administration may lead 5 or 6 directors of bureau under him to come to an exchange session, and then the next session could be led by the Financial Secretary, and then another session led by the Secretary for Justice, and then for future sessions, they could be led by the Deputy Secretary for Chief Secretary for Administration, and so on. I will set an example. I will be leading the first anti-chamber exchange. I will be bringing along the 3 SODs and the 3 DSODs, as well as the director of the Chief Executive's office, to come and meet members at the anti-chamber for exchanges. Anti-chamber exchanges could allow each director of bureau to have regular exchanges with members face to face. This will help them to build a close collaboration with members. It will be an opportunity for them to better explain policies and also for them to better learn about public sentiments. As for members of the council who will participate at these sessions, I will leave it to the council. I have made my initial proposals to the president. I'm grateful to Mr. Leung for his positive response. Subject to the agreement of this council, the director of the Chief Executive's office will work out the details with the electoral secretariat. On direction of our governance, at the inaugural ceremony of the 6th government, President Xi Jinping delivered an important address. He stressed that one country system has been well tested. It is a good system, and we should adhere to it in the long term. He's also explained in detail the 4 must in implementing one country, 2 systems. This is a valuable experience we've gained over time. First, we must fully and faithfully implement the principle of one country, 2 systems. Second, we must uphold the central government's overall jurisdiction while securing the SAR's high degree of autonomy. Third, we must ensure that Hong Kong is administered by patriots. And fourth, we must maintain Hong Kong's distinctive status and advantages. President Xi Jinping stressed that the central government is giving its full support to Hong Kong in maintaining its unique advantages and in maintaining close connection with the world, so that we could take forward reform. This will give great confidence to Hong Kong and the international community of the long and of the steady implementation of one country, 2 systems. President Xi Jinping has also raised 4 expectations. First, Hong Kong should improve its governance. Second, Hong Kong should continue to create strong impetus for growth. Third, Hong Kong should earnestly address people's concerns and difficulties in daily life. And fourth, the people of Hong Kong should work together to safeguard harmony and stability. I'm grateful to President Xi for his important address. It is of great significance to the governance of the SAR government. I and my governing team have already held follow-up meetings on the important address of the president. In our implementation of policies, this will remain our guiding principles and direction. In fact, the 4 tenets of my election manifesto more or less tally with the 4 expectations of the president. I'm very much encouraged by that. The address of the president is visionary and it carries great significance. I will be fully implementing the 4 expectations and including them in my policies. On governance, I am bringing to the people of Hong Kong an action-style government that focuses on results and resolving issues. My style of leadership is that I expect all SODs and Directors Bureau to be involved at the first instance where problems arise, and they should take lead and work without wasting time with their team. I take team culture very seriously. SODs and CSODs must actively coordinate work with different departments, and so that they could all work together and complement each other's strengths in achieving synergy, so that we could achieve, so 1 + 1 is equal more than 2. Now, I will require all Directors Bureau to set targets for their work. And then if there are issues, they must address them and there must be a stronger accountability culture, so there will be more effective governance. All Directors Bureau must submit their targets to the Chief Executive's Office in August. The government will be pragmatic and proactive in addressing the issues on concerns of the public. Where we need to have high-level leadership and coordination, I believe that some of the efforts need to be led by SODs. So I have directed that 4 working groups be set up to be led by SODs. First, we will set up a working group on helping disadvantaged students to break out of intergenerational poverty. The working group will be led by the Chief Secretary for Administration. In my election manifesto, I have proposed targeted poverty alleviating measures to help disadvantaged secondary students living in subdivided units to break out of poverty. So there will be targeted measures, and they will be led by the government. We will bring together members of the public in this effort, and then we will target the specific needs and come up with solutions. And then we'll also set KPIs for this effort. The second group is a steering group on land and housing supply. It will be led by the Financial Secretary. The group will coordinate the policies and work of all relevant departments and bureau in relation to land development and housing supply. This includes planning, land, environment, transport, infrastructure, social welfare support, and so on, so that we could boost the speed, efficiency, and capacity for such effort. And then we could enhance various procedures so that we will spare no effort in developing land and providing housing supply. The third coordination working group is on district affairs. It will be led by the Chief Secretary for Administration. The group will focus on issues of concern to districts, including hygiene, black spots, street obstruction, black spots, environment, streets, cityscape, and so on. The work of different departments will be coordinated. It will be result-driven. They will be targeted solutions, and the actions have to be taken within 1 to 2 months. And then taking experience from such action, then action plans will be drawn up for implementation in different districts on a permanent basis. Fourth group is the working group on public housing projects. It is an action working group to be led by the Deputy Financial Secretary. It's responsible for the production of public housing. Within the first 100 days of this government, there must be work proposals on speeding up public housing production so that we could have early increase of housing supply. The working group will focus on the private rental housing advance allocation scheme, so that the work of different departments will be coordinated. There will be better use of public participation model. The building design and construction and various procedures will be compressed. The aim is to ensure there is early completion of units. The 4 working groups will be set up soon, and the work details will be announced soon. Another issue of great concern to the public is, of course, our fight against the epidemic. First of all, I don't agree we should lie flat. We shouldn't allow the number of confirmed cases to keep going up, because with an increase in cases, that means there is a bigger base, and so there will be increase in risk of severe and death cases, especially for the high-risk groups. They have to face a risk to their life. This includes the elderly, the chronically ill, the immunocompromised. And also with a higher number of cases, that will increase the infection risk of healthcare personnel, and that will lead to reduction in healthcare staff. And also with increase in number, that means more people will be hospitalized, and it will lead to delay to other healthcare services, such as services for the cancer patients and the chronically ill. That's why we must not lie flat. We must continue to achieve early identification, early isolation, and early treatment to reduce that serious cases in infection. This is the way we should go by in protecting the health and life of the people. Now, there are various considerations in our anti-epidemic measures. We need to strike a balance between risk and needs. We need to base our policies on science and data so that we could take targeted measures, and we can then pay the smallest price for the biggest effect. This and minimize any impact on normal activities in the community. This includes effective use of the PCR test so that for those who are not infected, they could be screened out and they won't be subject to any restrictions. That way, they could resume normal activities as soon as possible. We will also consider wider application of technology to minimize the inconvenience caused by quarantine. Now, we have learned our quarantine arrangement from overseas. The Health Bureau is now reviewing the relevant data so that we could have a scientific and a targeted approach with the quarantine arrangement. This includes the quarantine period in hotels and so on. Of course, on reopening the boundary with the mainland, I'm fully aware of the challenges and difficulties involved, especially when the daily number in Hong Kong remains at the high level of around 2,000. We will adopt a pragmatic attitude in our discussion with mainland authorities in exploring these issues. We hope to build mutual trust, and then we could consider each other's position, each other's interests as we control risks and give assurance to each other. The SAR government will explore whether there are halfway options that could minimize risk to a certain degree, minimize inconvenience to a certain degree. We are fully aware of the challenges, but we will keep up our pragmatic communication with the mainland authorities. President, members, this is just the 6th day of this government assuming office, but all bureau have already started work on various fronts, including education, elderly care, welfare, youth development, attracting talents and investment. We try to enhance Hong Kong's competitiveness on different fronts and enhance our status as 8 positions under the 14th five-year plan. We will actively develop Hong Kong into an international innovation and technology center, and we would leverage on our advantage as an internationalized city, and we will further improve the ecosystem of INT. We will also work closely with Greater Bay Area and take advantage of the mainland market, the talents, and the industrial chains, and we will step up cooperation with mainland cities in the GBA and complement each other's strengths. The Hong Kong Palace Museum was opened on the 3rd of July. Members of the public are able to appreciate some 900 pieces of national treasure coming from the premium collection of the Beijing's Palace Museum. And I'm really grateful to the central government and the Palace Museum for their support. We will also make good use of our new and existing cultural resources. And then with the Palace Museum as well as the Empress Museum that showcases modern and contemporary visual culture, along with other a rich variety of cultural arts, performances, and exhibition, Hong Kong will be developed into a cultural and art exchange center between the East and the West. I have made my demands to the various SODs and directors bureau so that they could come up with policies and action plans as soon as possible. We are target-driven. We are result-driven. As for the details of the various policies, they will be announced in the policy address to be delivered in October. I and my team will reach out to the public members of this council and the individuals of different sectors so that we can listen to your views and formulate a policy address that puts the peoples first. President, members, Hong Kong has restored order from chaos. We're now at a critical stage of moving towards prosperity. In the next 5 years, we must, catch up with the and then with this rational executive legislature relations, we are able to break away from the destructive relationship where there's lots of focus and infighting in this council, and then with the with the executive-led principle, as well as the patriots administering Hong Kong principle, we could have check and balance in each other and work with each other. Together, we could develop the economy and improve people's livelihood, so the public will have better chances of realizing their dreams. Thank you.
The Chief Executive will answer questions from members. Members who wish to ask questions, please press the Request to Speak button. I've informed members via the Secretariat that to make best use of the available meeting time such that more members would have the opportunity to put questions to the Chief Executive, 3 minutes will be allowed for asking and answering of each question. The time for asking a question by a member should not exceed 1.5 minutes to allow time for the Chief Executive to give his reply. Questions raised by members should be as concise as possible. Members should not make arguments when asking questions. The Honorable Maggie Chen. President, I want to thank the Chief Executive for coming to the Council today. On the 1st of July, Presidency delivered his important address. He asked the government to enhance its effectiveness of governance so that we can enhance the administration so that this can be a government with innovation and to have effective governance on matters of prevention of elderly and child abuse. I'd like to know how the government can better monitor NGOs so that we can have social welfare services that are really people-oriented. Do you have any timetable for legislating on protecting these disadvantaged groups? Thank you. With regard to care for the elderly and children, the government has an unshakable responsibility, and this subject is close to the heart of many in the community. In terms of legislation, we have to take into account how, when a problem arises, we have sufficient measures to tackle it. On the question of child abuse, I understand that the government is prepared to present a bill to require people from different sectors to fulfill statutory requirements to ensure that children are properly taken care of. Legislation aside, I think monitoring is more important. As I mentioned, very often, we may want to enhance legislation to deal with the problem, but monitoring is just as important. The relevant organization must have a set of monitoring measures approved by the administration. The administration has the role of regular inspections to ensure that the measures are being implemented. In this regard, the Secretary for Labor and Welfare is very concerned about it, and we have had many exchanges in this regard. In monitoring individuals and organizations in fulfilling their duties, we have to do more. And in-depth work should be done. For instance, we should randomly check records of these organizations to ensure that measures have been implemented. I've served the government for more than 40 years. Now, very often, when leaders step in to check, then results will be delivered. So government departments will see what are the major priorities of the government. So in my government, I'm saying that leaders should step in so that matters can be ratified in the first instance. Thank you. Mr. Yang Wing-Kit. Thank you, President. I want to thank Mr. Johnny, the CE, for attending this meeting. Presidency said that we should address the aspirations of the community. Now, for the 400,000 residents in Wong Tai Sin, we've been asking for A&E services for a long time so that people do not have to travel to another district for medical consultation. Now, we have had a few terms of government, and the Our Lady Hospital has just got its expansion plan approved. However, it will only provide outpatient clinic services until midnight. Will you extend its outpatient services, and will you move the service reservoir in Shamshipo so that we can have a place for expansion of the Wong Tai Sin Hospital to address the need of the residents there? I understand that there has been many discussions in the council for the provision of A&E services at Wong Tai Sin Hospital. I have checked the overall planning, and I fully appreciate that from the residents' point of view, of course, they want convenience. I also understand that it's best if we can have the necessary service as close to us as possible. But when it comes to government planning, we have to look at the overall picture to ensure that healthcare resources and facilities are in the best interest of Hong Kong and achieve the best results. Now, we have got 7 clusters of the hospital authority. Each cluster has to ensure that there is sufficient resources so that all services can be provided to all residents in these 7 clusters. I understand that sometimes there may be different priorities when it comes to the consideration of individual districts and the different clusters. Now we have to see how in all 7 clusters we have sufficient resources so that deployment of resources can be cost effective and we can provide inconvenience to the community. As far as Wong Tai Sin is concerned, is in the Kowloon Central Cluster, Central Kowloon Cluster. A&E services are being provided by Queen Elizabeth Hospital, United Christian Hospital, and Kwong Wah Hospital. So now for any individual that requires A&E services, the overall coordination and transport and escort should be properly put in place, and we should also enhance the overall situation so the services can be better provided. The Health Bureau will continue to study this matter in the long run. A&E services for Wong Tai Sin is designed to be provided at the new hospital in the East Kowloon development. It will be bigger and better, and then United Christian Hospital's A&E department will also be expanded. The Health Bureau will see to this matter. Dr. Simon Lee, thank you. Dr. Dominic Lee, thank you, President. I congratulate the CE on his resumption of office. Now, in the government reorganization, it is said that there should be KPIs established so that he can really set up a result-oriented government. Last week, when presidency attended the inaugural ceremony of this government, he asked that this government strive to improve governance. Just a few weeks ago, I moved a motion on reforming the civil service. I suggested that KPIs be set up for performance of civil servants. Outstanding civil servants should be rewarded, and promotion need not follow seniority. But for those lazy and underperforming civil servants, there should be punitive measures. Grateful to members for passing the motion. Now, I'd like to ask whether our suggestions will be accepted so that we will do away with this culture of doing less to avoid mistakes.
Chief Executive, thank you, Mr. Lee. Well, we don't have major differences on this issue, but I hope you will take a fair look at the performance of civil servants. I've said this many times. In independent reports, competitiveness report, and including the competitiveness index in 2021, the efficiency of the Hong Kong SL governance remains among the top, is either top 1 or 2 in terms of ranking. And if that's the case, then the contributions by civil servants must, of course, be an essential element. But then Mr. Dominic Lee mentioned at times civil servants are not able to live up to the expectations of the public. Why is that the case? My analysis is that for any person, his or her potential has to be unleashed. But it's not just because of his own hard work. There must be other factors as well. For example, does the system allow them to unleash the potential? And what about interdepartmental coordination? Would it help individuals to fully realize potential and dedicate their effort to their work? Now, and also, are there outdated policies in the system, so civil service not able to deliver? So that's why my short answer is that we have to look at each and every case. If there are cases where public expectation cannot be met, we have to identify the cause of the problem. If there is need for high-level intervention, then that is something we need to enhance. And that's why I'm grateful to the Council for approving the reorganization of the government structure so that we are able to strengthen our leadership and create the Deputy Secretary of Departments post. As I said, I just mentioned different working groups I'm going to set up, and they will be led by SODs and DSODs. And as I said, when problems first emerge, there must be high-level leadership and direction. This will make sure that civil servants are able to work more efficiently with clear delineation of duties. But of course, if there are individual civil servants who've committed grave mistakes, there is a system in place to deal with that. But then when I proposed setting KPIs, the first and foremost purpose is to make sure that the progress is in line with our expectation. And then if we see delays, then we could intervene at once. That is the whole purpose of the KPI system. Its aim is to improve our efficiency. Mr. Ali. Chief Executive, thank you for coming to this council on the 6th day of office. And I also welcome your proposal to have regular anti-chamber exchanges. Under your leadership, I hope the SAL government will build a new style of executive-legislature relations. Normal travel. First, let me talk about resuming quarantine travel with overseas countries and places. In fact, I kept saying this to the media. This is something very much on my mind all the time. We want to facilitate travel from other places to Hong Kong and the other way around. At the same time, we need to have effective infection control in place. Now, before Professor Low assumed office, he had discussions with me. We would like to have a targeted approach to minimize the inconvenience of people coming to Hong Kong or returning to Hong Kong. I agree with his view. That is, we must have an effective way to screen out those who have not been infected so that they could resume to normal activities as soon as possible. In other words, we should only, barricade the tree that's diseased, but not other trees that are healthy. And I fully subscribe to that principle. I understand Professor Low is actively analyzing data to take forward this approach. And I see eye to eye with him on that, as I said. And in particular, we want to see what we can do about the quarantine period. At the same time, I say that we must do it in an orderly and gradual manner. Because if we take any measure, that and then we will have to relax our stringent control, then maybe it's not the best way forward. But anyway, let me say a bit more on the resumption of quarantine-free travel with the mainland, because this is of great concern to the public understand. Now, as I have discussions with mainland authorities on resumption of quarantine-free travel, that was at the end of the fourth wave of outbreak. And at the time, it was agreed that it's a matter of mutual trust and whether we're able to see each other's position, and as we consider possible measures. That's why I say that we have to be able to control risk and infection. And then when we go to the mainland, then there may be more convenient quarantine measures. Professor Low has had discussion with the mainland authorities about the 7+3 option. There is a high demand for hotel rooms for quarantine purpose. And so that's why the mainland authorities have increased the number of quarantine hotels from 1,300 to 2,000. We're grateful for that. So this shows that it's important that we have communication, that we're able to convey our difficulties or explain our difficulties to the mainland authorities and so on. Of course, I won't rule out any possibilities, but as we discuss practical solutions, I don't want to give the wrong impression to the public that we have already set our eye on one particular option. What I'm trying to say is that the principle is to minimize inconvenience. And then we try to see if there is any halfway option. So that's a pragmatic approach, and I hope the public could see that is the policy direction we have. Thank you. Ms. Connie Lam. Thank you, President. Good morning, Chief Executive. Thank you for coming to this question and answer session. Now, in past media interviews, you admitted that the current quarantine measures are inconvenient to travelers and the people of Hong Kong, and you will formulate strategy to reopen the boundary. For example, for home quarantine or shortening of quarantine period and so on. In fact, our competitor, Singapore, has removed all quarantine measures for inbound travelers. This is to facilitate business activities. Different sectors in Hong Kong would also like the SL government to relax quarantine measures in an appropriate manner, having regard to the need to control infection. So would you consider, for example, designating different risk level for different zones and places? So for low risk zones, the quarantine period will be, say, 3 days in hotels and 4 days of home care, and then for say a high risk or low risk, 7 days of home quarantine for those who've had 3 doses of vaccine and so on. So there could be different treatment for people coming from different risk zones. Well, I hope members will appreciate that the situation in Hong Kong is rather unique. We have a relatively higher proportion of elderly persons in the population. And we're grateful, of course, to the elderly for their contribution to the community. Now, because we have a high ratio of elderly, so there are higher risks. And also, our housing condition is more crowded compared to other places. So in terms of transmission risk and the risks brought about by an increase in the number of confirmed cases, our situation is unique because of the two factors I mentioned. But at the same time, I appreciate it's important for us to, keep up our connection with overseas countries, and we need to allow more travelers to come to Hong Kong. I also attach great importance to boosting our competitiveness and facilitating investors to come to Hong Kong. So that's why the Health Bureau is now actively looking at the issue. Say, with the hotel quarantine, we need to base our policy on precise data. We'll see how we could shorten the quarantine period while managing the risk. For prevention of imported cases, every day we still have over 100 imported cases. That's why we must proceed with caution. I don't want her to have to backtrack after announcing a policy, but of course I am anxious too that we do something. So Ms. Lam, I will ask the Health Bureau to work as soon as possible to complete their review and analysis, and then they could explain some ideas we have in mind to you. Thank you. Mr. Chen Xiu-Hong. Thank you, President. Chief Executive, let me congratulate you again for being elected the 6th Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR. I and members of the public have high expectations of you and your governing team. This year is the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the motherland. In the past 25 years, Hong Kong has made huge achievements with the support of the central government. It shows to the world that the one country, two systems work and is welcomed by the people. But then foreign forces keep, attacking China on Hong Kong issues. They try to undermine China's image and suppress their development. So there will probably be more of this because of the competition between these major countries. Now, what measures do you have to deal with false information, and how can you tell a good Hong Kong story and a good China story? Chief Executive, Mr. Chen is spot on. In the first internal meeting since I assumed office, I mentioned the need for us to do good, proper publicity and to tell a positive story about Hong Kong. Now, in the past, government officials of Hong Kong probably have just been working in a pragmatic manner. We may be gentlemen, but then there are many others who are not around the world. So how do we explain ourselves properly? First of all, we have to tell people about our advantage, our achievements, and our success. There have to be a good theory basis for explaining these issues. So that's why we have to explain our work properly. We have 15 policy bureaus, and all these bureaus have made good achievements in their respective areas. So we need to tell people about what we've done well. We can't just, be too humble. So we need to keep repeating our achievements. That's something we need to do better. And we ask members of this council to help us in that respect. Secondly, we have to make good use of different platforms. Say in our communication with the media, the public, and the world, These are channels for us to give out information about Hong Kong. In the past, again, we've adopted a rather pragmatic and even conservative approach. So we'll be doing more in this area. Apart from the conventional media, there are new social media platforms and other new ways of communication. We have to explore all these possibilities. And thirdly, apart from being pragmatic, we have to be bold. That means we have to tell people what our strengths and our advantages, and we have to do that in person. That's why I've said that we will be dispatching officials to overseas visits, and we'll invite others from different sectors to come with us and tell people about our achievements. That will include the Trade Development Council. As in recently, we have set up different exchanges. So we will be sending delegations overseas to tell the Hong Kong story. And we can tell people about what is actually going on in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Mr. Tony C. Thank you, President. There are many sectors in Hong Kong facing a shortage of manpower and brain drain. The pandemic and the brain drain or immigration might be one of the causes, but then it's also because of aging population and low fertility rate, and fewer young people are moving to Hong Kong from the mainland. So when we lack manpower and talent, how can we do as required by President Xi, that is to keep strengthening our momentum of development, and how can we continue to enhance our competitiveness? Chief Executive, you earlier on talked about the wastage of manpower and talent, and you said that these people are bound to come back to Hong Kong. I have the feeling that you're not being proactive enough. So when it comes to population policy and our manpower policy, what concrete plans does the new government have, and what targets do you have? Thank you. I've just been in office for 6 days, and I've asked bureau directors to start working in different areas. When it comes to manpower, of course, manpower is indispensable in raising our competitiveness. Well, we can do this on a few fronts. First, is Hong Kong attractive? I think so. As mentioned, because of our quarantine requirements, well, there is some deterrence for talents to come to Hong Kong. So I have been working on this very proactively. My policy objectives do consider attracting talents to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is an attractive place. We must not be too humble. Now, in the past, we have done very well in attracting talents to Hong Kong. Our competitiveness ranked number 5 in some very important world reports. Of course, we have a free economy of the rule of law. We are an inclusive and open society. We are a vibrant society, a low tax regime, and our systems are well established, a high degree of transparency with the rule of law to protect people's rights. So no one can smear us in these areas. Still, we have to continue to do better. We have to provide more opportunities to attract talents. We should expand our market. Our market should not be confined to Hong Kong. Of course, many people like to invest and develop in Hong Kong, and the more important market is the Greater Bay Area. Our liaison with the Greater Bay Area and integration into the overall development of the country is very attractive. Now, for innovation and technology, now if we can attract leading enterprises to Hong Kong in this sector, that will enhance the overall competitiveness of Hong Kong. Furthermore, I have discussed with the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau. We're exploring together how we can attract enterprises to Hong Kong with policies so that they can bring development opportunities to Hong Kong, and we should provide facilitating measures for them to come. The Bureau is actively exploring this, and I hope that within a couple of months, the Bureau can come up with new suggestions for me so that I can include them in my policy address. The purpose is to compete for talents with other parts of the world. Dr. Priscilla Leung. President, I welcome the Chief Executive to our question and answer session. This is really a new chapter for good governance. On the 1st of July, President Xi gave Hong Kong a big gift, and that is one country, two systems is a good system and it should be adhered to in the long run. That means, I believe, 2047 is no longer a cutoff point. And I think this point should be pressed upon to Hong Kong and to the world. I think this should be a very happy news for the people of Hong Kong. Meanwhile, the president also showed that he is fully aware of the problems of Hong Kong. He said that we should ensure integration of the overall jurisdiction of the central authorities, a high degree of autonomy, and he mentioned 4 expectations, one of which is to set up key performance indicators for our performance. I think the most important part is our mentality. Many young people and also different sectors of the community may not know how to grasp this great opportunities brought about by the current situation. One country, two systems is a good system, and presidency has once again reaffirmed his commitment to the system. One country, two systems is an example for the whole world, is a great achievement. How can we tell the story of China well and the story of one country, two systems well? In particular, after the black violence, many people have no regard for the rule of law and they treat our motherland as enemy. So how can we ensure that different sectors of the community understand this? Please allow the Chief Executive to answer your question. Dr. Leung, I can agree more with what you said about the president's or presidency's important speech. Now, one country, two system has been fully implemented and reviewed. It is in line with the fundamental interests of the country of Hong Kong and Macau, and it has the full support of the 1.4 billion people in Hong Kong. It's fully supported by everyone in Hong Kong and also recognized by the international community in general. This is a good system. There is no reason why we should do away with it, and we must adhere to the system in the long term. I'd like to remind everyone this important speech made by President Xi, as said by Dr. Leung. How can we build up this ambience in Hong Kong so that one country, two systems can sail far and long and steady, and how our ideology is in the best interest of the development of Hong Kong, as pointed out by President Xi? We hope that all compatriots in Hong Kong can has built up these core values that love the country and love Hong Kong, and we should continue to be inclusive. We should seek common grounds in preserving differences, and we should preserve the fine traditions of the country so that we can build a better future for everyone. So my focus is on core or mainstream values, and this echo what Dr. Leung said just now. We have to ensure that the whole community can have stability, and as regards how we build up mainstream values, first we have to strengthen traditional values, and for soft education we can make use, we can deal with our media and our journalists, and in arts and culture we should build up mainstream values in these areas. And as for patriotism and love for Hong Kong, now we must promote such mentality so that we have a stronger sense of national identity and affection for the country. So apart from soft education I just mentioned, now culture as well as the general ambience in society are important, and we should also let the world know Hong Kong's achievements. Why should we tell the world our success story? Then we can have a international recognition and identity, and people will feel proud of being Hong Kong, for being part of Hong Kong. Thank you. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, President. Presidency has mentioned 4 expectations for the new term of government. And he said that we must remove the vested interest in Hong Kong, and then we have to ensure that everyone in Hong Kong can share the fruit of prosperity. Now, and whenever we talked about improving labor rights, the government and the business sector will stand on the same side, saying that they will add to the operating costs of enterprises. They already consider protection for workers, and therefore we cannot see major improvements for labor rights, not to mention sharing in the fruits of prosperity and development. I'd like to ask the President, how do you deal with the 2 points of the 4 expectations raised by President Xi? Now, FTU suggests that we first start with an annual review of the statutory minimum wage as a start, because currently we have biannual reviews. As a result, wages have lagged far behind economic development, and we have a working poor in Hong Kong. We must also review the statutory minimum wage mechanism, because in 2021 there was inflation, but then there was no increase in SMW. We have to ensure that employees share the fruits of prosperity. So will the Chief Executive accept FTU's suggestion? Chief Executive, thank you, Mr. Kwok, for your suggestion. Now, in terms of economic development and benefits for the employees, we must unite the whole community to work hard together to contribute to our economy. Of course, we must develop our economy, and we have to ensure that the benefits of economic development can be enjoyed by our workers. Thanks to the hard work of all workers in Hong Kong, we see prosperity now. I started from the most junior rank myself, and I am grateful to the hard work made by our workers, and they should be fully recognized for their contribution. However, we do not just have the business sector and the employees. The community, the academia, the government, and the business sector should work together, because the whole industry must develop so that our employees can be duly rewarded and they can realize what they want to do. Now, if they can engage in higher paid jobs, and if their jobs are in line with their interest, that's the best. And so in dealing with labor rights and protection, we should have an overall perspective. We should not just isolate a certain sector. We should not just confine our thinking. We should look at the whole cycle in society. Workers should have skills, and they should be able to strive for their dreams. And if their remuneration can be increased because of development in their respective sector, they can work in a good environment. We rely on the government as well as the business sector and the academia and the labor sector to work together. As regards SMW, I understand that come October, a report will be presented to me. I'll first read the report and see what recommendations it contains. And when it comes to review of the mechanism, the Secretary for Labor and Welfare can look into it fully. Thank you.
Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, first of all, I would like to welcome the Chief Executive to this council. Just now, the chief executive said he's going to set up 4 working groups. And apart from housing and land supply, there will be a working group on poverty alleviation and another on improving the environment of the local districts. I'm glad to hear about that. I hope you will be able to come up with some pragmatic solutions soon. Now, President Xi Jinping delivered his important address on the 1st of July. He said it's important to uphold sovereignty and protect national interests. This is the highest guiding principle. Now, I always say the cybersecurity is will have great impact on national security. So it's important to legislate for to prohibit false information and so on. And also, then the latest power blackout of the China Light and Power shows that it's important that we ensure the security of infrastructure. Now, foreign forces are still eyeing Hong Kong. So in terms of the overall security consideration, do you have plans to review different aspects of security and see if there's need to act in any way and in enhancing security? And how do you make sure that the government has a strong sense of awareness with countering risk and also protecting national security? Thank you. Chief Executive. Now, it is our constitutional duty to protect national security. It is also our duty to do so as a Chinese. So the government has the duty to do that. Now, you mentioned a series of possible security threats. Now, of course, we need to be reminded of the different security risks and threats, and then we could keep enhancing our security systems. For example, anti-epidemic effort is also about health and safety, personal safety. And then in my election manifesto, I mentioned that for the 6th government, we need to build a solid foundation for future development. And by solid foundation, I mean we need to address the different security risks and threats of national security is one thing, food security, system security, and financial security, and so on. They are all very important. So with ensuring security, there are 2 considerations. First is about legislation. So that's why we have the Hong Kong National Security Law, and also we have the duty to legislate for Article 23. But as I've said before, we need to come up with some legislation that will cover all possible security threats. And of course, we will move as quickly as possible. But at the same time, I have asked that government departments concerned to look at possible risks and the effectiveness of countering this risk. And also we need to enhance security, say for the 4th and the 5th wave of the epidemic outbreak. To some extent, we have been so much affected by Omicron because it's transmitting so quickly. It's a much higher level of transmissibility. So we need to be prepared for unforeseen circumstances. So we need to enhance our security level. That means we need to increase manpower and resources. We also need to enhance certainty. By certainty, that means when we need to use certain resources, we know they will be ready within specific time frame. And the second certainty is that when we have limited resources, where we could get help. Now we have an advantage here because we have one country, 2 systems. The Greater Bay Area cities are like brothers to us. So when we need help, how they will help, this is one area about certainty. But then, of course, with the security measures, some are made public, some aren't. For the security measures made public, they are to give people assurance. But then for the measures not public, this is to make sure that enemies won't be able to attack us by learning about our security the measures. So we need to review all these security threats in Hong Kong, but then different departments need to improve their own security measures and their contingency plans too. Now, I said that we have an emergency response mechanism. This is to make sure that we could enhance our certainty and security. For example, when I judge that we are in a crisis and then we need a certain number of staff members to handle that, then I'll be able to deploy, say, 3% of the 180,000 civil service force. So that means about 5,000 plus people. Or even if the threat is more serious, then we could raise that to 10%. So that means we will have over 10,000 people to respond to the situation. So it's also about the speed of deployment. And also, we need to have these people trained properly. And then when we assign tasks and people know exactly what they need to do at the first instance, and then everybody will be in position. And this is something I have to work very hard on. Mr. Benson, look, now President Xi Jinping mentioned 4 must and 4 expectation in his July 1st important address. He said, he also reminded us that we have to care for young people, and we need to help them address their challenges. Now, many have criticisms about young people. Young people may see things very differently than adults. For example, we keep saying that young people want to buy a home so they could get married and have children. That means they want to start a family. But then for young people, many tell us that they want to buy a home because they want to have the roots family based in Hong Kong. Now, I have for many years been actively promoting direct communication between the government and young people. Chief Executive, I know you care very much about young people. If there is a young person now standing before you, and he wants to tell you about the visions and the views about Hong Kong. So what do you expect the young person to tell you so that we could together resolve on the issues affecting Hong Kong? Chief Executive, well, this is I care very much about the Committee of Hong Kong. Care very much about young people in Hong Kong. Every young person may have different aspirations, so I would very much want them to tell me, Chief Executive. Well, in the next 5 years, maybe the government still not able to meet all my demands, but at least what I want to do, I'm able to do, and I'm able to realize my dreams, and I'm moving in the right direction. Now that is the least that I set for myself as a target. But of course, I want us to do even more than that. I want young people to tell me that in this 5 years, I'm able to start my own business. I say I've started my own barber shop, or I'm taking good care of my parents. Each young person may have different aspirations. As I grew up, I also had different goals. But of course, this goals would change over time. That's why I stress the importance that we have a comprehensive youth development policy and blueprint. We need to cater to the different needs of young people and help them at the macro level. In terms of, employment, education, career, and so on. Now, in the important address of the President Xi, he has asked the government to do a good job in that respect. Now, we have 15 policy bureau. Some may be directly involved, some are more indirectly involved in youth development, but I have already aligned the objectives of the 15 policy bureau. We must go by the 4 expectations in our policy formulation. Now, as I mentioned in my manifesto, we must listen to the views of young people. And it's not just about conventional education, there's vocational education, there's retraining, lifelong learning, and having correct values and so on. So when it comes to education, work, and so on, we must work hard for the young people. And I've also proposed setting up 18 community caring teams in the districts. Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you. Welcome, Chief Executive, to this council. Now, in the July 1st important address of President Xi, he mentioned young people. He said, if young people develop well, then Hong Kong will develop well. So young people are the key to the development of Hong Kong. Many young people are actually doing well, say, in innovation, technology, financial services, and so on. We're seeing many young talents. But then, since the Black Letter riots, there are many people who have a wrong idea about young people. They think all young people are rioters. So what can we do to proactively tell a good Hong Kong story? We must explain what young people think in Hong Kong, how they want to develop a career in line with the development of the country. We need to tell a good story about young people in Hong Kong, so people around the world know more about Hong Kong people. You said you will be sending delegations overseas. What about delegations on telling the story about young people of Hong Kong? So you bring young people together to tell the story overseas. Ms. Nixie Lam, a Chief Executive. Thank you, Mr. Lam, for your ideas. These are some of the ideas I have in mind too. We have many successful stories about young people. Many have made good achievements, and we have many top talents too among young people. Now, to a certain extent, we have let the destructive force have a say in our education. Some school principals have actually poisoned our students. Now we've we've suffered much because of the 2019 Black Flag riot, so we know we need to do more. First, we need to gather all these stories, successful stories about young people. As I said, we need to write up all these stories because these are stories that we could take pride in. Why is it that it seems that Hong Kong is not doing so well? That's because we are not proactively telling people about our success stories. So we need to do that. Thank you, Ms. Lam, for your suggestion. But apart from telling these true stories, we need to do more. I mentioned various platforms that we could make use of. The government will do that. I hope members of this council and different groups in the community will also join in this effort. And of course, we have to go overseas because there is this saying, seeing is believing. So they are able to see young people who are doing well, especially where young people who've made huge achievements in science, in sports, and so on. And then we've also made huge achievements, academic achievements, such as on mathematics or, on the world history. I see in some quiz shows, some young people performs really well, and that's left an impression on me. So we need to keep doing that repeatedly. And then we will be able to tell the world our true achievements. Professor Lau Chi-Pang. Thank you, President. Chief Executive, you say you are result-driven in formulating policies. That's why the public are very happy to join you in starting a new chapter for Hong Kong. Now, there's some student of Confucius. He said that you have 5 years in your term. Hong Kong's a small city. Can you tell us, 5 years on, what sort of achievements would you take pride in the most?
I thank Professor Lau for this very thoughtful question. I think it's challenging for me to tell you in a few words, because I've got 15 bureaus and they're responsible for 15 policy areas. They are like my children. If I focus on one bureau, then others may say that I've only favored one. Now, the chief executive plays a very unique role only to be played by himself, and that is my being a dual my due responsibility. I'm the head of the Hong Kong SAR, and at the same time, I have to be accountable to the central people government of the PRC. I've also have to be accountable to the Hong Kong SAR. Constitutionally, my role, I have this additional role compared with other people. If I play this role well, that means I have done my job as a chief executive well. I've got 15 children, I mean the 15 policy bureaus. I hope they can all unleash their full potential. They may come to this council and I may say that, well, while there's still room for improvement, I believe I'm far you have already achieved what you're expected to achieve. I hope that one country, two systems can even achieve greater success. Now, 5 years down the road, when I meet legislators here for the last time, and if I can say without qualms that I have a scale new height with one country, two systems, and I have fully complied with the constitution and the basic law, that should be my target as a chief executive. And I will feel very comforted if I can achieve this target. Ms. Chen Yueming, Chief Executive, I'm grateful that you come to our question and answer session only 6 days in office. Now, you should enhance housing and economic development in the Northern District, and you would also better integrate Hong Kong with Shenzhen. Now, there are several planning mismatch in the North District. For instance, near Hang Yuen Wai, we have the anti-northwest landfill, and near Law Wu, it is planned to be a huge columbarium with 200,000 niches, and also sewage treatment plants, slaughterhouses, etc., will be relocated to Hang Yuen Wai, Man Kam To, and near Law Wu border control point. These are negative facilities, and this would be in the way of integration with Shenzhen, and it is subject to criticism by residents of Shenzhen. Your policy is to be result-oriented, and as soon as you assumed office, you also called the leaders in Shenzhen to enhance communication. Will you rectify these planning blights and relocate or replan these obnoxious facilities? Chief Executive, thank you. The Northern Metropolis is an important plan for Hong Kong. It is going to be an important growth engine for Hong Kong. It will also help Hong Kong to scale new height because it will be a place where we have technology, jobs, environmental protection, safe homes, and places of entertainment. It will be a metropolis in Hong Kong. It is also a plan to enhance the overall quality of life in Hong Kong. I'm grateful to the CS4A and the FS for discussing with me in great earnesty how we can take forward the Northern Metropolis. I'm particularly grateful to the Financial Secretary for his views because development is very close to his heart. I want to thank the FS for his support in my administration. I'm sure we're going to launch good policies. As far as the Northern Metropolis is concerned, I'm going to discuss within my team the framework used for taking forward this initiative. I will personally see to it. As pointed by Ms. Chen, I called the leaders of Shenzhen and Guangdong province First, to express my attitude because we are very close. We have strong ties, and we're grateful to the Guangdong province for supporting us in this fight against the pandemic in the provision of supplies, for instance. I really wanted to show them my gratitude. Secondly, there is ample room for cooperation. North Metropolis is closely tied to Shenzhen, and we are closely related. Any development must be well coordinated and integrated. And so I have a proactive role to play as regards in what form I will discuss with the 3GOS. I like to hammer home this message to the community. First, I attach a lot of significance to the development of the Northern Metropolis. I will do an overall planning. Secondly, I understand the importance of cooperating with relevant authorities on the mainland. We should enhance mutual trust. We should complement one another and achieve mutual benefits. We must have mutual support and respect. We should complement one another. So I will personally be involved in the development of this area as regards the overall planning of the Northern Metropolis. Of course, after I've decided with the 3DOS's the framework for developing this program, that will be well taken care of. Ms. Dr. Chao Man Kwong, thank you. Presidency made three important points in his remark. That is, we must improve governance. We must enhance the strength, momentum of development. We must uphold harmony and stability, etc. So we must have a good government think tank so that we have good policies. Members of the public need dreams. Patriots need to realize their dreams together. Many think tanks have said that something like the Central Policy Unit should be established. So in some places they have the National Planning Commission. In Singapore, they have a development strategy committee in the Prime Minister's office so that they can feel the pulse of latest development in the world and in the country. And this will help our public administration reform in the short term. In the long run, it can give us policy advice on further reforms and to address the expectations of presidency. So will the chief executive consider resetting up a body like the Central Policy Bureau? Is there any progress, or is it, as reported by the media, it will only focus on international affairs and it will not duplicate with the current departments that have done local policy research? Chief Executive. Thank you, Dr. Chao. In fact, I've already got a name for this unit. It's called the Chief Executive's Policy Unit. Because I, as the leader of Hong Kong, has to be accountable to the Central People's Government as well as to the Hong Kong SAR. So I'm not just the chief executive of Hong Kong. I must have a national perspective. I have to take care of the overall interests of Hong Kong. At the same time, I have to examine the international situation. So this unit will help me to make decisions. So this policy unit for me, of course, I have to take care of public sentiments, the needs of different sectors of Hong Kong, for instance, the aspirations of the middle class as well as the grassroots. I have to be fully aware of all these demands. If I adopt a broad brush approach, it will create unnecessary problems. So there should be a fine breakdown of different policies. It will be thoroughly discussed by my policy unit. To put it simply, we'll focus on domestic matters. We must fully understand national development, and we must also fully examine the international situation in coming up with policies. This is in line with what President Xi has asked us to be. We must have a local vision. We must have affection for the country, and we must have this macro perspective of the international community. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chen-sing, since the return to the motherland, we have more and more outsourcing arrangements and more sectors are being affected. And many people are now working in frontline jobs with lower pay. And I think this has intensified the poverty gap. And for the since 2016, we have been having a higher Gini coefficient. So do you have any plan to improve the outsourcing arrangement and improve the remuneration of outsourced workers? Will you reform the government tenders requirements? And in assessing tenders, you should take care of occupational safety and health of our workers. Don't forget them. You should also start a new chapter for them. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Your question touches on our outsourcing policy. As I mentioned in my election manifesto, we're going to review our outsourcing policy. The Labor and Welfare Bureau in particular will work on this area. My demand is all the issues mentioned by Mr. Lam should be fully considered in the review. And I think to be effective in our review, we should be focused. Of course, a full and comprehensive review should be considered, but at the same time, we must be focused and targeted. Now, to be result-oriented, we like to tackle the problem. And of course, we have seen if the size of the civil service continues to inflate, then it's not something good for the government. And I think the multiplying effect, if for the public sector to spend the money, should be higher than that for the government. Now, for our outsourcing system, I set a lot of store by our monitoring system. We have to ensure that contractors fulfill the requirements. So there must be a monitoring system. Secondly, apart from meeting the targets, we have to safeguard the interests of workers, because the hard work of workers should be rewarded and protected. Let me cite an example. Now, I receive this complaint. Actually, I'm the complainant myself. Now, there is an outsourced piece of work. A planter has to be raised because it hasn't got enough soil. But then there was no drain in the planter, so water would remain in the planter. Now, with the planter raised, the drain is only added the additional portion. That means there is no drain at the bottom of the planter. So we must strengthen the outsourcing system so that we can have better results. And we should protect the rights and interests of people working for that contract. The last question, Mr. Lam, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, President. I'm pleased to hear from the Chief Executive that we're going to have 4 special action groups. One is for coordination of district affairs. But we know that for implementation of all policies require a proper district consultation framework. Now, in the past few years, district councillors, which are supposed to play this role, are not able to discharge this function anymore. And for district fight crime committees and district firefighting committees, etc., in terms of helping to implement district policies, well, their roles and functions are rather blurred. Next year, we're going to have a new round of district council elections. So my question for the chief executive is, for reform of district affairs and district management, do you have any timetable and plan?
Chief Executive, thank you, Mr. Lam. Well, yes, there is a clear timetable because the time is set for district council elections. So before the next district council elections, we must have come to a decision and have made a plan. Put simply, we must comply with the requirements of basic law, and we will actively start study on that. We have been in office for 6 days, so we're going to start our study from now on. Of course, we will take stock of past experience. We will have to look at the failure of the system in the past and identify the cause for that failure, because we need to comply with the basic law and the laws of Hong Kong. We have to see how we could set up an effective district structure. Of course, we welcome your views because many of you have much experience in district work. Maybe you can tell us how we could, enhance the system so it complies with the basic law and the laws of Hong Kong. And we're happy to hear your views. As I said, we want good governance. We want positive interaction between the executive and legislature. So we want to listen to your views. And wisdom in the community is something we should always cherish. So that's why I very much wish to hear your views. And then we could come up with a system that best fits the requirements of the basic law and the laws of Hong Kong. So that the Chief Executive's question and answer session ends. The Chief Executive will now, and after the Chief Executive leaves the chamber, we will immediately start the regular council meeting. The Chief Executive will leave the chamber now. Please, members, please stand.